Is John Bolton the most dangerous man in the world? He's got leaders around the globe terrified he could trigger a full-scale battle between Iran and the U.S. Every day, that idea seems more possible. It's getting so scary, America's allies are now warning the U.S. could even end up in a war it doesn't want by accident. Hey, a lot of people believe that's how World War I started. Check out the escalation in just the last week. American headlines are humming with leaks from the White House warning that Iran is loading boats with ballistic missiles. The U.S. has ordered all of its military personnel out of the region. Its closest ally there, Saudi Arabia, is tweeting Tehran has launched drone attacks, that it's time for the U.S. to strike first. And then there are those Saudi and Norwegian oil tankers mysteriously attacked in the Gulf. The accusation is that Iran was behind this. Iranian leaders say they don't want war, but worry the U.S. is getting ready to attack. The New York Times reports the U.S. plans to send 120,000 troops if provoked. And so who is the leading American in charge of all this? Well, it's Trump's national security advisor, John Bolton. He's argued to topple Libya, Syria, and Iraq, and on his list now, Iran. So who is John Bolton? Well, even Fox News suggests they're afraid of his war talk on Iran. Tucker Carlson said this week that for Bolton, a war with Iran would be like having his birthday, Christmas, and Thanksgiving all wrapped into one. Bolton has a long history of arguing that if the U.S. doesn't like the way a country is led, they should be taken out with bombs. North Korea, for example, he publicly called for the Libya model. Remember what happened to Muammar Gaddafi? And Iran, well, Bolton's been lobbying for regime change there for more than a decade. Check out what he said just this past February as the Iranian regime celebrated its 40th anniversary.
You are responsible for terrorizing your own people and terrorizing the world as a whole. I don't think you'll have many more anniversaries to enjoy.
Whoa. Trump is obviously aware of Bolton's reputation, but says no worries.
He has strong views on things, but that's okay. I actually temper John, which is pretty amazing, isn't it? Nobody thought that was going to happen. I'm the one that tempers him, but that's okay.
But is Trump still in control of that relationship? Bolton is now sending ships to the Middle East and warning an attack from Iran is imminent. Oddly enough, the day Bolton announced he was sending this aircraft carrier to Iran was almost exactly 16 years ago to the day from this moment.
In this battle, we have fought for the cause of liberty and for the peace of the world.
Yep, that's former President George W. Bush on the exact same ship after his invasion of Iraq, announcing mission accomplished. Well, of course, we've since learned that the mission was far from accomplished. So Bolton does have Trump's ear. Almost as soon as he arrived at the White House last year, he talked the president into backing out of an international nuclear agreement with Iran. And now Bolton's being called the leader of the B team, a global alliance pushing for an attack on Iran. Here's how Iran's foreign minister warned of the dangers this week.
I believe the B team is dragging the United States, or at least tries to drag the United States into a war. It's not in the interest of the United States, nor in the interest of the region. I believe they are committing suicide.
Suicide. So who are the other Bs? Well, it's Benjamin Netanyahu, the president of Israel, Mohammed bin Salman, the Saudi crown prince, and Mohammed bin Zayed, the president of the UAE. Here's a look at what a war could mean for the rest of the world.
We'll see what happens with Iran. If they do anything, it will be a very bad mistake.
If Trump attacks Iran, it could trigger a mega war. A Middle East conflict that would draw in Israel, Saudi Arabia, and American allies in the Persian Gulf and beyond. That could then force Russia, China, the Europeans, and even Canada to pick sides. And it's not just bombs anymore. Cyber warfare is a growing threat. Iran is considered a major hotbed for state-sponsored hackers. War would increase the odds that Iran and its allies would target American infrastructure like financial markets or telecommunications. The U.S. is ready with a preemptive strike if Iran makes any move. It's also developed a cyber weapon codenamed Nitrozeus, ready to take out Iran's air defenses, communication systems, and crucial parts of its power grid. Then there's oil. Prices could double if Iran closes off the Strait of Hormuz. 30% of the world's crude oil flows through this strategic shipping route. A war with Iran could also trigger another refugee crisis in a part of the world that's already hurting. Of the 60 million displaced people globally, close to 40% originate from wars in the Middle East. Joining me from Washington to talk about all of this is a familiar face, David Frum. He was an advisor to President George W. Bush in the lead up to the Iraq War and helped come up with that phrase, axis of evil. Now he writes for The Atlantic. So, David, you supported the invasion of Iraq, but now you're writing for The Atlantic that if there is a similar war with Iran, that terrifies you. Why?
Well, let's look at the difference in the process. I mean, with the Iraq War, George W. Bush put in place a lot of important pieces. He had authorization from Congress. He had enabling resolutions at the United Nations. He built a multilateral coalition. He took his case to the public. There was over 70% support in the American public for the Iraq War on the eve of the Iraq War. He had troops in place. He had an operating war plan. And with all of that, it was still less than a complete success, to put it mildly. Now, what if you don't do any of those things? What if you have no allies, no plan, no authority from Congress, no war aims, no definition of success, and you're dealing not with a country of 30 million with a weak historical consciousness, which is what Iraq is, but a country of more than 80 million people, a near-nuclear state with a strong sense of history. You're going to try to change the regime there with no plan to do it. That's not going to go well.
So you have said that this is so crazy, you can't figure out what is going on in the Trump administration if it is considering this. What is going on?
Well, it looks a lot like a bluff. No one's seen the evidence for what they are warning about, but they are huffing and puffing. So there's a real possibility here that they're just making threats without any plan to follow up. But the problem is, sometimes if you play cards and you make a bluff, the bluff gets called.
Well, there have been accidental wars in the past. What if there's a mistake? What if there's an accident?
What if there's a mistake? We could easily stumble into one. The United States and Iran don't have good channels of communication. They have very different strategic cultures. And by the way, Iran, it's an authoritarian regime, but it's not North Korea. It is not, they can't keep information away from their own people. That regime rules by repression, but it doesn't rule by terror. They do have public opinion, and they do have nationalism. So just as the United States, if it huffs and puffs, can't afford to back away and look weak, the Iranians may be in a similar position, and they are a much stronger state than Iraq ever was.
Are we on a path for war? I mean, Donald Trump is asked, is there a war coming? And he says, I hope not. What's your sense?
Well, that's not a very reassuring answer. I mean, the answer to that question is, we are looking forward to a peaceful resolution of our differences with Iran, but the Iranians know what our requirements are. Because the United States doesn't communicate clearly, because Trump likes this idea of himself as an unpredictable figure, that's how you get risk. It's very important for superpowers to be very predictable, to say, here are our red lines. You cross this line and things happen. If you stay on the other side of the line, things don't happen. Because Trump doesn't give the Iranians a path away from conflict, he is in danger of walking himself down a path to conflict without ever knowing where he's going.
It sounds, it's hard to read the tea leaves here, but it sounds like the military, the White House, that everybody is divided over this. What's your sense? Is it building towards war?
Well, a lot of the people in the military are trying to alert friendly reporters. This is all vaporware. No one's told us that we're supposed to be doing anything. There isn't, that there are early reports, not all of them completely reliable, but from people with some sources who say that admirals in particular are indicating, we haven't got any plan here. No one's giving us any instructions. And so there's a discrepancy between the highly aggressive rhetoric that comes from the administration and some of its supporters in Congress, and the actual work that is being done to be prepared for the worst should the worst happen. But that's the kind of gap into which trouble can step. Because
we've been told that there are photos of Iranian boats with missiles being prepared. We're told that there's a plan to send 120,000 troops.
Well, I'm sure it's true that there are Iranian boats with missiles on them. I mean, that the Iranians have been sending power boats up and down the Persian Gulf. They took British sailors captive. They behave in very aggressive ways. They send their boats too close to the American fleet. They send drones over American ships exercising the Persian Gulf. Yeah, of course it's true there are Iranian boats with missiles on them. The question is that if 6 months ago, that wasn't a reason for war. 9 months ago, what is happening now that those same obnoxious behaviors have risen to this level?
What is happening?
That looks. I think it looks more like the Trump administration finds its economic methods are not yielding the results that it wants. It's escalating its rhetoric because it's a very rhetorical administration, and now it's sort of stuck, and it talks to itself in ways that are very militaristic, because that's the way Donald Trump likes to talk. But he doesn't like to match his talk to his thoughts. He doesn't like to match rhetoric to preparation.
The Canadian government was very supportive of the nuclear agreement, was upset when Trump pulled out. Stephen Harper was quite a hardliner on Iran. Andrew Scheer, the new leader, has been less, I guess, clear on where he stands. Yeah. Where should Canada be now? What should it do?
Well, one thing I think that any self-respecting Canadian government is going to want to do is to say to the Americans, if you want our support or that of any ally, you have to ask for it. You can't just demand it. You can't just threaten. And that has been a real problem with the Trump administration. They don't come and ask allies and obtain that freely given buy-in that is always so crucial to American success. I think Canada will want to follow a rational American policy. Canada's huge human rights concerns in Iran. Canadian citizens of Iranian origin have been brutalized by that regime. No one should have any illusions. Iran is a place that is not only terribly repressive at home, but it is a risk taker. It does commit international terrorism. It really is a problem regime. But you want a solution to the Iran problem that doesn't put the world on the path to a war no one is planning for.
David Frum, thank you very much. Great to talk to you. Thank you. David Frum in Washington. So where does the Canadian government stand on the escalating tensions between the U.S. and Iran? Well, there's no official statements from either the Liberals or the opposition, but we did get reaction from Conservative MP and former Defence Minister Rob Nicholson and from Liberal MP and retired Lieutenant General Andrew Leslie.
And we should pay a great deal of attention to what's going on. We have concerns with Iran, and we made that very clear as a government, and we'll watch them and monitor whatever they do and work with our allies.